y'all, it's Ilana and welcome back to my channel. So it's been a while since I've talked about dating. So this video is to talk about how to deal with anxiety while dating. So trigger warning, if you have anxiety or topics of anxiety do upset you, I encourage you to probably not watch this video. But if you don't mind, then feel free to continue on. But on this channel, I do talk about what it's like to navigate life and dating in Portland. So if you're thinking about moving to Portland or you're just single navigating the dating world, wherever the case may be, go ahead and subscribe down below because I think you'll really like it here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and tackle this subject. If you don't know by now, I suffer with moderate to severe anxiety. I've always had anxiety. My anxiety has typically been more generalized. I wouldn't say that I have social anxiety, but there are times where being in big social settings can overwhelm me from time to time. And it's funny because I actually am pretty extroverted, but I'd be lying if I said that dating doesn't make me hella anxious, because it totally does. I may be a very confident person and I've learned to grow and develop confidence over time, but I still struggle with anxiety. And I've had to really push through my anxiety and try to break those barriers, but sometimes I can't always do that. And let me tell you, even though I've talked about how I'm very confident in my decision making when it comes to dating, dating really does make me very anxious, and I experience so much anxiety when it comes to dating somebody new, especially if I like the person. So with this video, I wanted to start off by saying I'm not a mental health therapist. I'm not licensed or certified in any kind of way. What I am teaching you guys, or not teaching you, but sharing with y'all, is that this is just what's helped me, and I hope that it can help you too. Just keep in mind that what may work for me may not necessarily work for you, and that's okay. I'm just here to just share my experiences and how I've tackled anxiety when it comes to dating, and hopefully it can help you. So with that being said, let's kind of go into the first thing that I want to discuss. So in order to understand where anxiety in dating comes from, I think it's really important to talk about attachment styles. And this is something that I actually can confidently talk to you about because I did learn about it in grad school, and I actually did my master's thesis on this when it comes to attachment styles. And I feel like attachment styles are becoming more and more popular these days. So that excites me because I'm a huge attachment theory nerd. But I will say, I did know about attachment theory before it was cool. So you're probably wondering, what exactly even is attachment theory? According to John Bowlby, I never remember how you pronounce his last name, his definition of attachment theory is core mental structures through dynamics between an infant and a caregiver, and the influence in the mental structure on life and relationships. There are 4 attachment styles. There's secure attachment, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, and preoccupied/dismissive attachment. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to talk and focus more on anxious attachment. So those who have anxious attachment styles, they are typically going to be very focused on the relationship. People who have anxious attachment, they're going to have lots of feelings of worrying. There's going to be a huge desire for closeness. They typically need a lot of reassurance. And I will say this attachment style is definitely found more in women than it is in men. People who typically have anxious attachment are going to want to fulfill unmet attachment needs so they can find security within love. That's typically what anxious attachment is kind of in a nutshell, and what people tend to experience when having anxious attachment within relationships. So that's going to give you a really good understanding of what anxious attachment is, and typically what people experience when it comes to dating. When a lot of people start dating someone new, especially if there is somebody that they like and they're unsure of how that other person feels to them, they may have anxious attachment. And that is my attachment style. And I know I do come across as this confident, secure person, but when it comes to dating, I'd be lying if I had secure attachment styles, because I don't. I am very, very ridden with anxiety, and dating men, especially men that I like, makes me hella anxious. So I'm gonna get into the things that I've sort of learned on how to manage my anxiety and how to normalize anxiety within dating and making your partner be more understanding about it when it comes to stuff like this. So let's get into the first thing. One of the first things that's kind of helped me with my anxiety in dating, it's that it's really important to recognize any negative feelings and assumptions that I may be experiencing when it comes to dating. One thing that I've learned over time, and this was through mistakes that I have made, was to not jump to conclusions and to just go to the person directly and hear what they have to say before you self-sabotage. That's something that I have done so many times when I was in college and even in grad school when it came to dating, and it really just completely ruined any kind of relationship that I had because I let these negative thoughts and assumptions just consume me, and it definitely ruined relationships that could have been worthwhile at the time. So I've just learned how important it is to not jump to conclusions, and I also think it's really important that you don't project your insecurities onto others, because then that makes people feel very avoidant and they're not going to want to spend time with you. So I just sort of learned to not project those insecurities onto other people and to just talk more about your insecurities, as opposed to just making someone feel bad just because you're insecure about something doesn't mean that that person needs to feel insecure about it as well, because that will turn people off to dating. So that was one of the first things that I had to recognize when it came to my anxiety and dating. So this next thing is something that I really did not take advantage of until really, really later into my stages of dating. So we're talking late 20s here. And I feel like some people are too afraid to do this, but I think it's really important. And that is to be upfront about your anxiety with your partner. So if you're dating somebody new and you like them, I personally find it absolutely important to be upfront and share your anxieties with your partner and let them know how certain things make you feel very anxious, and seeing if there's ways that you two can work together so there's that balance of reassurance. People who have anxious attachment or those who are anxious in general need reassurance. And it's not a matter of neediness. It's that people have probably been abandoned before, and that is a common thing that people with anxious attachment styles have, is that fear of abandonment, because they don't know how that person feels about them and that they're scared that that person is going to leave them out of the blue for no reason. I think the biggest thing when it comes to this is that it's really important that you only do this when you feel incredibly anxious, or if there's something that your partner is doing to trigger your anxiety. That is typically when you bring that conversation up. But if the person hasn't done anything to trigger your anxiety, then you don't necessarily have to bring it up. But if something is starting to seem like it could become problematic for you, I think it's okay to calmly express how that makes you feel, because the right person will be understanding and will not be weirded out by you feeling like you need some sort of reassurance because you have anxiety. I think there are many different ways that you can address your anxiety to your partner without sounding clingy. So for a good example is, for me, as someone who has anxiety, I think it's really important that I get consistency. People who have anxious attachment styles really need consistency, because when their partner becomes inconsistent, they're going to start feeling like their partner is slowly fading away from them, and that can make them feel very anxious about dating and where they stand with that person. So something that I've done in the past with a partner is, if I notice that communication is starting to slow down and it's me being the one to initiate the conversations only, then I would like to just gently bring it up, and I say something along the lines of like, hey, I've noticed that it's kind of only been me just initiating plans and conversations, and it does make me feel a little bit anxious knowing that I'm the only one who's kind of putting in the effort in this relationship. So I just kind of want to know if there could be times where you also initiate conversations or maybe initiate plans. It would just really help me out. It just does make me feel a little bit anxious at times, and sometimes I need that reassurance knowing that you still are interested in me and that I need consistent communication. Lack of consistent communication is a huge deal breaker for those who do have anxiety. If you are dating somebody who does have really severe anxiety, it's really important that you are very consistent with them, because when you're not consistent with people who have anxiety, they're going to start having doubts about your relationship and wonder whether or not you like that person or not. So it's so important that for you with anxiety, and I know it can be really scary and easier said than done, but it's so important that you confront your anxieties to your partner. The right person will understand, and they will be willing to work with you and give you an explanation of what's going on as to why maybe they have been inconsistent lately. And if they are still not making an effort, then you can confidently assume that that person is really not interested in you, and they're not taking your feelings seriously, and they're not being mindful of your anxiety and what you're going through. But the right person will work with you. The right person will be understanding and will say, thank you so much for letting me know. I am so sorry I made you feel that way. I would say don't be scared to bring up your anxieties with your partner, because you'll never know what could happen. I think it's, again, and it goes back to not assuming things. If you just mention your anxieties and you just be honest about it, I think can really benefit you in the long run. Third thing here that sort of piggybacks off this, if this person is making you feel anxious all the time, that is not your person. Especially if you've already addressed your anxieties to this person and they're still not really respecting your wishes when what you've been asking for really isn't a lot, then that is time for you to walk away. So, little story time. I was dating a guy a couple months ago who made me feel so incredibly anxious. And I know that this guy also had social anxiety. His anxiety was completely different than mine. So we were two people with anxiety that were dating each other. But this person eventually stopped putting in the effort. He used to text me all the time, every day, throughout the day in the beginning of the relationship. And then I want to say maybe within a month in, he stopped really communicating with me. Our dates were starting to dwindle down where we weren't seeing each other as often. And then it became me putting in all of the work. And I was scared that if I just stopped talking to him and was waiting for him to make the first move to initiate conversation, I was afraid that the relationship was going to be over. So I would still continue to text him just to see if I could get reassurance that he was still interested in me. And there would be so many times where he would leave me on read, but he would still reply back to me and he would still try to make dates, but it always was me initiating the dates. It was never him initiating the dates. Like, I can't be the only person to initiate dates. And it just got to the point where I really didn't know where I stood with him, and that's when I had to have a conversation with him about that. And I addressed my anxieties when I told him how the communication and the lack of it was starting to really affect me, and I wanted to talk about it with him. And he had apologized and said that it was nothing that I did wrong, that it was all on him, that he also has depression. He said he wants to work on that, and he promises that he will be better with communicating. But then he didn't do anything to work on that. You know, he told me that he was going to be better at communicating first with me and initiate dates, and he wasn't doing that. And that was frustrating. So the last time that we hung out, then the conversations really started to stop, and I really wanted to see what was going on, and that's when eventually he said that he wasn't interested. And it's just, I'm just thinking, like, why couldn't you just be upfront with me in the beginning if you weren't interested in me? And I think that definitely can be hard for people who do have anxiety, because they're also afraid of hurting somebody, and they're also afraid of that person hating them. And I definitely didn't hate him after we ended things, even though the text message he sent me was a little rude, not gonna lie. But it's so important that you don't date people who make you feel anxious. Once that person starts making you feel anxious, I'd say first bring it up with them. And if they're not doing anything to change and to be mindful of your anxiety and what you're going through, then it's time to end that relationship, because you deserve to be with somebody who doesn't make you feel anxious, who's going to be consistent with you, and is going to give you reassurance when needed and make you feel valued and loved. Here's the thing, I don't have social anxiety, but when I've talked to people who have social anxiety, this is what some things that they've told me to be mindful of. So if you have social anxiety, listen up because this one is for you. I think it's really important that you set boundaries with your partner. So if you have social anxiety and sometimes going out all the time on dates can really trigger that for you, I think it's really important that you talk about that with your partner and set those boundaries and expectations and make compromises on where you want your dates to be or how often you want your dates to occur. As I mentioned in the last tip, the right person will be very understanding and patient about this. And they will also be willing to work with you and respect your boundaries and talk about what's necessary for you to be happy in this relationship so your social anxiety can be shook off so you can enjoy the relationship without feeling anxious all the time. However, if you do have social anxiety and you've come to realize that dating is way too hard for you and something that you're not ready for, then honestly, I recommend that you don't date. Wait till you're in a better headspace or in a better place mentally where maybe your anxiety isn't as triggered, and then you can start dating. I think it is really important that we do date when we're in a good headspace and our mind is really healthy, because when we start dating when our mind isn't in a healthy spot, we could end up really hurting a person emotionally and mentally, and that's not something we want to do, right? So I think that is something that people should be mindful of if they do have social anxiety. So if you feel like dating is way too overwhelming for you and you know that you're not going to be able to commit to somebody, then take a break from dating and wait until you're in a better headspace to do it. Because that way you're not going to hurt anybody, and you're also not going to hurt your own mental health and your own sanity. This last one is going to sound pretty cliche, but it's so true and it's just necessary, and that is to seek therapy. Therapy is so important, especially if you have anxiety. Therapy is supposed to be a safe space for you to talk about your anxiety with a professional, and they can help you manage your anxiety. They can even prescribe you medication if that's something that they're able to do, and they'll be able to work with you and teach you some strategies and how you can cope with your anxiety. Therapy is so important. I only see a therapist about once a month because I've realized that I don't need therapy as much as I used to back in 2020, and now I just go to therapy once a month because that's enough for me to kind of manage my feelings and my anxiety and other mental health disorders that I have that I want to talk about. But I do think therapy is also really good for those who do have social anxiety as well. And I'm here to tell you that there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking therapy. We really need to take this stigma off of therapy because it's okay to get help. Getting therapy and going to a professional does not make you weak. It actually makes you really strong. It is okay to seek therapy. You are such a strong person when you go to therapy, and it really can do wonders, and there's nothing wrong with you. So that is like the last thing that I can really advise you to do to help you with dating with anxiety, is to talk about how dating makes you feel anxious, and somebody will be able to work with you to really shake that anxiety off of you so you can date more confidently and with less stress and with less pressure and with less anxiety. So tell me, what are some things that you've done to manage your anxiety, especially when it comes to dating? Comment down below so others can hear your thoughts and how it's helped you. I'd love to know how it's helped you as well. And if you liked this video and you thought it was really helpful, make sure you do give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!